Last night, a female Dallas police officer returned to what she believed to be her apartment after her shift had ended. She was still in uniform when she encountered Mr. Jean in the apartment. It's not clear what interaction was between them, her and the victim, but at some point she fired her weapon, striking the victim. She called 911. Officers responded in about 4 minutes. Dallas Fire Rescue also responded and took Mr. Jean to the hospital, where he later died. At the very early stages of this investigation, initial indications were that we were dealing with an officer-involved shooting. However, as we continued the investigation, it became clear that we were dealing with what it appears to be much of a very unique situation. Therefore, we have ceased handling it under our normal officer-involved shooting protocol. A blood sample was drawn to test the officer's level for drugs or alcohol, and at my request, we are in the process of obtaining a warrant based on the circumstances that we have right now. We have also invited the Texas Rangers to conduct an independent investigation. They have just arrived a moment ago, and they are currently being briefed.
Chief, what is the warrant for that you're in the process of trying to get?
Based on what we know right now, that warrant is for manslaughter.
Where is the officer now?
I am not certain where the officer is at this particular point in time.
Have your investigators talked to the officer?
Questioned the officer, not at this time, but they have spoken to her.
But as part of the investigation, or just preliminary when they showed up on the scene?
Preliminarily when they showed up on the scene.
So at this juncture, Chief, you're telling me that you're seeking a warrant, but you don't know the status of that individual, that officer? She's not in your custody right now? She's not in the custody of the Sheriff's Department at this point?
I'm telling you, based on the circumstances that we had initially, the initial call that led us to the scene, we thought we were investigating an officer-involved shooting, and we handled it accordingly. When we realized that the circumstances led us to another direction, that is why we are now investigating this incident separately, and that is why we have the Texas Rangers to assist us in that process.
Is it not an officer-involved shooting because she was off duty? She was still in uniform.
That is correct.
Can you tell us what the officer was doing prior to that? Because you put out a press release earlier saying she was tired, or she worked a long shift. Can you give us some understanding of what she was doing?
Anything that I give you right now would be me speculating, and I won't speculate as to the officer's, whether her fatigue level, what she did, because I do not have that information.
So is the press release wrong, or that she was tired?
I can tell you what I know right now. I don't have that information.
What is the officer's name?
Whether or not the Texas Rangers are conducting a criminal investigation?
I can only answer one of you at a time. Mr. Rabb, your question was, what is the officer's name?
Yes, ma'am.
We will release the officer's name once she has been officially charged, like we would do any other resident of this community.
Can you please specify that the Texas Rangers are conducting a criminal investigation, and if the Dallas Police Department is conducting an internal investigation as well?
Right now, we have the Texas Rangers. They are doing an independent investigation into this incident.
So does that mean that the Dallas Police Department is also continuing within the criminal investigation side of things?
That is not a true statement. I have the utmost respect for the Dallas Police Department. We have the hardest working and some of the best detectives in this country. And we respect our SIU, but right now, in order for us to be truly transparent to this community based on the circumstances, we have invited the Texas Rangers to conduct this investigation.
When did her shift end?
At this point, I'm not certain what time her shift actually ended.
One more question.
Can you please provide whether or not the race of the officer and whether or not she was a patrol officer?
She was a patrol officer, and she is a Caucasian female.
All right, Shem, did the officer know that they were?
I don't have that information.
Can you explain the difference information at this time? We'll update you as more information becomes available.
Tonight, this new video posted by a neighbor appears to show an off-duty Dallas police officer in uniform and in distress, moments after she walked into an apartment that she thought was hers and killed the man living there. The medic seen here trying to revive him.
The Texas Rangers had an opportunity to interview the officer. Based on that interview, they asked us to hold off on the warrant.
Dallas police initially said they would pursue a manslaughter charge against Officer Amber Guyger, who's been on the force for 4 years, after she told investigators she believed the innocent man was an intruder. But that changed after the Texas Rangers took over the case.
This is the worst pain any mother can feel.
Botham John, the 26-year-old unarmed black man, was a college-educated accountant and youth pastor.
I don't know what to say to her. I know she took my life away, like my very own life.
Tonight, investigators await blood and alcohol test results from Officer Guyger as a family continues to demand justice. Tom, investigators aren't saying whether the officer and the victim knew each other, but she has been placed on administrative leave.
Attorneys for Botham Jean's family say the mystery witnesses came to them and the family first and not to investigators. Those attorneys claim moments before Jean was killed by off-duty officer Amber Guyger, the women heard banging and shouts of "let me in." Fox 4 Sean Rabb is outside the Southside Flats on Lamar Street with the latest. Sean.
Steve, so those two women we believe are sisters, and they've so far told their contradictory story only to the civil attorneys for Botham Jean's family. Now that will change. They will sit down with investigators, tell them what they saw and they heard, their version of those events, as those investigators try to figure out the truth of what did or didn't happen last Thursday night and then present a full picture to the grand jury. The district attorney's office and Texas Rangers will interview two women who we are told have a different account of what happened before Botham Jean was shot in his apartment by Officer Amber Guyger, who thought she was at her apartment encountering a burglar.
These are independent witnesses. They don't have a dog in this fight.
This cell phone video of Officer Guyger pacing on the phone after the shooting, taken by the women who did not go to police or Texas Rangers, but took their story to attorney Lee Merritt.
She heard pounding at the door, and she heard "let me in," shouted by "let me in," at an elevated tone. She heard more pounding at the door, and then shortly thereafter she heard gunshots.
That is not the narrative of the evidentiary search warrant or Guyger's own sworn statement to Texas Rangers. Guyger told Texas Rangers in her statement she parked on the wrong floor thinking it was her floor, went to the wrong door on the 4th floor, not her 3rd floor apartment, found the door ajar, saw a large silhouette moving in the apartment, gave verbal commands that were ignored, and fired at least twice. Botham Jean struck once in the chest and died.
Video of Officer Amber Guyger being booked into the Kaufman County Jail last Sunday evening on the manslaughter charge. Guyger was shackled at the waist and she was brought in for processing, appeared emotional, at one point wiping her eyes. It's not unheard of for a police officer accused of a crime to surrender in another county. In this case, it was the Texas Rangers' decision to allow Guyger to surrender in Kaufman County. Her bond set at $300,000 was paid and she was released the same evening.
Protesters were arrested near AT&T Stadium and charged with Class B misdemeanors. The demonstration was focused on the shooting death of Botham Jean and another man who was killed by Arlington police.
The chief complaints Amber Guyger be fired from the Dallas Police Department and the charge against her upped to murder. Right now, the 9 still in jail. Outside of AT&T Stadium Sunday, a protest. The coffins call attention to Botham Jean and O'Shea Terry, shot and killed by police in different cities under different circumstances. The protest action expressing disapproval to black men being killed by police.
This is exactly what we want to see people in America doing.
9 protesters were arrested for blocking or obstructing a pathway. Police say they were warned 3 times, first at Gate E outside the stadium, then on a frontage road, and finally when they locked arms at Randall Mill and Collins. Their civil disobedience, the active refusal to obey certain laws.
These protesters are encouraged by the Jean family, and I'm happy to do that as their attorney. The protest, the style that they've gone about protesting is in the spirit of peaceful protest, and it's something that is deeply American.
Jean family attorney Lee Merritt compares the time the 9 have spent in jail, nearly a day for a Class B misdemeanor, to the time Amber Guyger was behind bars after turning herself in to the Kaufman County Jail for the killing of Botham John.
She sat there for a few hours on a manslaughter charge. I mean, somebody was killed and then bonded out with not a whole lot of fanfare.
These pictures from Merritt show 7 of the 9 inside the Arlington City Jail. Protest, he says, will continue.
They're not going to intimidate people from participating. And I want to be clear, the family has encouraged.
It's an exclusive look inside the apartment where a Dallas man was tragically shot to death by a cop who mistook the apartment for her own. We're taking you inside the apartment for the first time since the deadly shooting, looking for clues as to why Botham John was shot and killed by an off-duty police officer inside his own unit. It's a typical bachelor's apartment. The leather sofa piled high with clothes, a bowl of cereal on the ottoman, and a flip-flop nearby. Let the Spirit of the Lord and let it rise. 26-year-old Botham John was a devout Christian. Off-duty Dallas police officer Amber Guyger says she thought she was entering her own apartment on the 3rd floor, but in fact, she was on the 4th floor. Lee Merritt, the attorney for the victim's family, says the hallways are the same, but there are distinguishing things, like this potted plant on the cop's floor. There are no plants on the victim's floor. There was a red doormat in front of Jean's apartment, but no mat at the cop's apartment. After the shooting, Amber Guyger told police that she found Jean's door ajar. Attorney Merritt says the apartment doors have a sure slam system. They close automatically.
I went in there hoping to find some answers to get a better understanding about what happened. I didn't find anything that provided any clarity.
Rumors are rampant that Officer Guyger and Jean knew each other. Do you have any sense that the two people knew each other?
Not in the sense that most people think, like a past relationship.
There have been, as you said, several warrants signed by judges executed in this case. Aside from the arrest warrant for Amber Guyger and the search warrant signed September 7th, returned to the court today, the others are sealed and not accessible. We showed the inventory documents to the family's attorneys right after the funeral. The return does not indicate where the items were located or who they belong to. The inventory return shows 2 fired cartridge casings, 1 laptop computer, 1 black backpack with police equipment and paperwork, 1 insulated lunchbox, 1 black ballistic vest with police markings, 10.4 grams of marijuana in Ziploc bags, 1 metal marijuana grinder, 2 RFID keys or electronic keys, and 2 used packages of medical aids. The recovered items were exactly the same items lined out in the search warrant.
This is nothing but a disgusting attempt to assassinate the character of a wonderful young man. It's the same old playbook, assassinate the character after they assassinate his person. Right. As Attorney Merritt and Attorney Washington said, he didn't kill anybody. He was killed.
Botham Jean's autopsy will tell more. Attorneys not involved in the case tell me they believe that specific language about contraband and narcotics was included in the search warrant because it is something that may have been in plain sight when officers were in John's apartment after he was killed by the officer. The search warrant for the crime scene that was Botham John's apartment signed in the early morning hours Friday, September 7th. By law, the warrant has to be executed in 72 hours, just being returned to the court today. There are 3 search warrants, not for anything in Southside Flats where Botham John and Amber Guyger both lived, but for electronic data from Ring video systems and other cameras from a nearby complex of townhomes, as investigators try to prove up or prove down what the officer has said about that night in her statements to 911, first responding officers, and Texas Rangers. The search warrants for 2 townhomes located at Arch Place. That Cedars complex is just east of Southside Flats, north of Dallas Police Headquarters. The warrant for 2 units that have Ring video doorbell video systems and other mounted cameras. The search warrant says they're looking for electronic customer data held in electronic storage. The order to search for and seize the servers, papers, and files located at Ring in California for the devices at specific addresses from Thursday, September 6, 2018 at 8 a.m. until that night at 11:59 p.m. That's the day of the shooting. The warrant carries this footnote: officer-involved shooting, manslaughter, target, Amber Guyger. The search warrants by a Dallas County District Attorney investigator to try and test the veracity of something said perhaps by Guyger when she spoke with Rangers or in those initial comments to Dallas police who responded about her comings and goings that day, especially in the moments before the shooting at the wrong apartment. But we don't know for sure because the probable cause affidavit used to secure the search warrants, that is sealed and not made public tonight. Investigators trying to collect any and everything they can to substantiate or repudiate Guyger's statements about that day and night.
By now, most people riveted by this ongoing story have read and have an opinion about Amber Guyger's arrest warrant. We took it to some criminal defense attorneys who say what's not included in here could be the most telling. This arrest warrant offered the first detailed account of what happened inside Botham Jean's apartment last Thursday night. It also gave criminal defense lawyers their first look at whether the Texas Rangers believe Dallas police officer Amber Guyger committed a crime when she shot and killed the 26-year-old man.
It reads much more like an accidental killing.
Well, it's a plain vanilla bland affidavit.
Two prominent defense lawyers we spoke with say the words reckless and intentional are missing from the probable cause affidavit, which would usually be included in manslaughter or murder warrants.
It's an interesting read. I will tell you, it doesn't read anything beyond negligence, if that. They simply do not specify how she is reckless, which is the required culpable mental state for manslaughter. It doesn't rise to the level of criminal misconduct.
Attorney George Milner says it's clear the Texas Rangers affidavit is careful not to implicate the officer. The investigator described how Guyger walked into what she thought was her apartment at the Southside Flats, and inside encountered a large silhouette she thought was a burglar. Criminal lawyer Robert Henton says including those elements will only help Guyger's defense.
So if it was a reasonable mistake of fact, that's an affirmative defense that's got to weigh into this thing very heavily.
You're a longtime criminal defense attorney. How confident would you be if you represented this officer?
In my honest opinion, I think if I was representing her, she'd walk.
We're talking to witnesses, we're doing lab report, we're doing everything to make certain that everything gets presented to the grand jury. A murder charge or not?
What you're saying is you're going through a data collection process. Once you completed your investigation, then you will then take the case to the grand jury. So, and are you also saying that if you take it early, you may not have all of your evidence,
There you go.
and that will also determine whether it's manslaughter or not?
That's exactly right.
Judge Johnson, go right ahead, bro.
Dallas City Councilman Philip Kingston basically went off today of the investigation into the Botham Jean shooting, accusing the DA, going so far as to accuse DA Faith Johnson of, quote, screwing it up. Kingston responded to news that the DA will not release 911 calls, radio calls, or any possible body cam videos that exist, or Amber Guyger's personnel records during her time as an officer. The transmissions made by Guyger in the moments after the shooting are considered key evidence to prove or disprove her story that she mistakenly walked into the wrong apartment directly above hers at the Southside Flats and mistook Botham Jean for a burglar when she killed him. Kingston told us after today's council meeting that it makes the city look bad that nearly a month after the shooting, so little information is being released. He blames DPD Chief Renee Hall and DA Johnson.
I think the investigation's over, and I think that we need to start being transparent with the information that these decision makers are looking at, because they've all said, we want transparency, we want transparency, we want transparency. But their actions are 180 degrees from that.
Now, we received a response from the DA's office which says Kingston's comments would only fuel arguments for a change of venue in the case if there's an indictment and trial. That statement reads in part, this potential case should be tried in Dallas County, not some contiguous county where the interests of justice are not as compelling. The DA's office is following the law in its effort to seek a fair and impartial jurors in any potential trial regarding this tragic. Those demanding harsh punishment for Officer Guyger are also not very happy with this arrest warrant, including the wording and the belief inside that Botham Jean's apartment door was not completely closed when the officer entered.
This is my key. This is my fob. I turn it. I open. Let me see if my door stays ajar. Nope. Lies.
Kleiman did say he supports bringing starting pay for police and fire from $51,000 to $60,000 to compete with surrounding cities. But both he and Mayor Mike Rawlings voted against across-the-board raises for police. Kleiman went on to criticize the Dallas Police Association for providing legal representation for Officer Amber Guyger.
We have out-of-control associations and unions that close ranks and protect officers. They're really doing more than a disservice to this community, but gunning down members of our community. And we're going to give them a raise. Colleagues, it's shameful. It's shameful. We are now at yet another crossroads in this community between who do we support as a council? Our community, our citizens, our taxpayers, our residents, or just the union bosses who take advantage of a potential mayoral election and council election coming up, take advantage of this council in almost unfathomable ways.
Received 783, y'all gonna end up standing by at 1210 South Lamar in a gunshot wound.
Elements for 19, 1210 South Lamar at Southside Flats.
Okay. 125 is Charlie 116, I'll go into that.
I'm going to tell you what, y'all just clear up and I'll put you on at Fox 144. Let me head you that way. Get a supervisor for the 19.
Lima, we're just about code 6.
And let's walk on our toes. Is that Lima 310?
320.
125 with code 6, where is she at?
They're saying apartment 1478. Any descriptions? That one.
It'll be a 15, right?
It does sound like that.
Now let the girlfriend get inside at the Century Lake Highlands apartment from 2101. Call the door in a gray shirt, dark tights, waiting outside.
Lima 310.
Lima 310?
Walker had the person who ran inside.
Walk 443, give us the floor.
143, and repeat the last. Fourth floor, apartment 1478.
Because the city of Dallas currently has 38 unresolved liability claims against Dallas police officers, including one that the city has already spent nearly $500,000 to fight. The police dash cam video from 2013 shows just part of the story. Two Dallas police officers are in pursuit of a reported stolen vehicle when the driver jumps out and runs away. That's Senior Corporal Amy Wilburn. She then rushes up to the moving vehicle, now frees the video. Who you can't see from this vantage point,
I remember everything,
is this man, Kelvion Walker. At the time, he was 19 years old. He's sitting here in the passenger seat of the car, still in a seatbelt, unarmed, and according to an independent witness, Walker had both of his hands up.
That's the first thing I did, and as I'm watching her the whole time, like, she could see me through the glass. It just happened that fast where she just opened the door, and I'm just like in shock for a couple of seconds. Then I'm just like, what you shoot me for? As soon as I look down and I see smoke coming out of my body.
You can hear Walker screaming in pain on the video. An internal affairs investigation determined Wilburn violated the department's deadly force policy. She was fired. The former officer is set to go to trial on a criminal assault charge in January. As for Walker, by the time he arrived at the hospital, according to his medical records, he did not have a pulse. Walker underwent 3 major operations to save his life. Doctors say he will have back and leg pain, along with medical complications the rest of his life, including this.
The bullet is actually still in me.
For now, it's too risky to remove. Walker has sued for damages and for nearly 4 years has been waiting. How much money has the city given you?
The city hasn't given me anything.
But the I-Team discovered while Walker hasn't received any money from the city has paid a private law firm so far more than $500,000 to defend the fired officer in her civil case. According to city records, this is more money than the city spent to settle all 7 police misconduct claims from 2006 to 2011. Now compare it to the past 5 years, where the city spent $10.8 million to settle 23 cases against police officers. Civil rights lawyer Jeff Henley says this doesn't necessarily mean officers are now behaving worse.
I don't think that there's necessarily been an increase in the violent propensity or the unlawful propensity of certain police officers. I think we just have better means of documenting those abuses now.
In other words, now there's video. In 2014, the city paid a $1.1 million settlement to Ronald Jones after this dashcam video showed an officer beating Jones and wrestling him to the ground. Jones was jailed on a charge of assaulting a police officer. The charge was dropped when this video came to light, contradicting the officer's account. Then last year, the city paid out a record $1.6 million to Bobby Bennett for what was captured on his neighbor's home security camera. Bennett's mother called police to help with her mentally ill son, but seconds after arriving, officers shot Bennett 4 times from 20 feet away. Bennett had a small knife in his hand. As for Walker's case,
they have absolutely taken every chance they can to delay this matter.
The city has already spent a record amount on legal fees for a single officer misconduct case. More legal fees are likely. The civil trial is at least another 6 months away.
Do you think they owe you something, though?
Oh, yeah.
Walker and his attorney are seeking a $10 million settlement. Now, this increase in the cost to settle these claims is not unique to Dallas. Several large cities across the country have also reported paying more in recent years to settle police misconduct cases. But here in North Texas, that's not the case everywhere. The city of Arlington in the past 5 years paid out $1.9 million to settle police excessive force claims, while records provided by the city of Fort Worth show Fort Worth paid out just $12,000 in law enforcement liability claims. Fort Worth, however, would not tell us how many of its cases have not been settled.